Okay, like we did yesterday, please pop your questions into the chat as we're going at any time, but also feel free to put up your hand and we will pause and hear what you have to say. Well, it was a really good session yesterday with this group, some really good input, people having a good think about the specifics of how we can design and manage roads, but also just sort of recapping the fundamentals of road safety audit for some of you, and some of you getting your head around that. So I had a couple of things to finish off. We had finished at the end just talking about this local government project to seal the road, which then created a see-through effect, or enhanced the see-through effect, which unfortunately caused, or was a big contributing factor in a lot of the overship crashes at this location that really spiked. So that was our reminder of the importance of getting audits done, even for projects that are seemingly proving to be a safety benefit. But the bit I didn't quite get to was to explain that there are different types of road safety audits. So we have the steps in a road safety audit that I'm going to take you through shortly. And that's the same for any of these stages of a project. But you might get asked to do a feasibility stage road safety audit, or a preliminary design stage road safety audit, or a detailed design road safety audit, or it's, in construction and there's road safety auditing of the traffic management setup, or just before the road opens, immediate post-opening for existing conditions. So I'll just jump onto these and show you, I suppose, a little bit about each of those, not in detail. The feasibility stage road safety audits are the sort of big picture planning style road safety audits. You don't get a lot of information often. You might get forms of intersection and alignment and these sort of things, but you're not getting much detail. So here's sort of a very big project, a bypass, and that, you might be asked to do an audit at this stage. You might have some planning study stuff and a few other bits and pieces of information, but you're thinking about big picture sort of safety issues, things like how are people going to get from one area to another, or how are they going to how are they going to get from this area down to here? You're thinking about interchanges. Are they good forms? Are there better ways to do it that would have safety implications? And it's just that sort of level of thinking. You may get a little bit more detail, sort of some high-level stuff where you're starting to drift into the next phase of road safety audit, like this one. But when you get to the next phase, you're actually getting some designs that you can really start to sink your teeth into. So the preliminary or concept design stage audits could be on a survey base, could be on an aerial base, where you'll see the design laid out and you'll have some more information to work with. You won't have the 3D design. You'll be missing some of the plans, maybe the signage plan or the drainage plan or these sorts of things, but you'll be able to get a pretty good feel for where the scheme is. This is actually, I would say, my preferred. I like auditing at this stage because you've got enough to get a real feel for where the safety issues could come out, but you're not, I suppose, pouring through hundreds and hundreds of pages of long sections and cross sections and the like, which is the detailed design. I mean, this is very good because and it's actually a little bit easier to a degree. It takes a lot longer, but it's a little bit easier with detailed design as long as you can read cross sections and long sections of things, because you can get all of the specific details. Sometimes the stage back, you're making a few assumptions. But so one of the reasons I really like it is that there's still more willingness to change when you're at this stage. When they've got to the detailed design and you've got all of your documentation together, there's a reluctance for any sort of significant changes. But yeah, the detailed design stage road safety auditing, you get the works. I mean, you get all these long sections, cross sections, and alignment plans. You get the pavement design, the signage, line marking plan, the signal phasing, the signal plans, lighting plans if they're there. So it's a really comprehensive amount of documentation, and it really does take a lot of time to work through. Also flag that, if you're somebody who is not familiar with a lot of this documentation, you really do want to make sure you're part of an audit team, and somebody in that team does have those skills and expertise. So my colleague Jamie Robinson will come in. He'll talk about detailed design stage road safety audits and things you really want to be looking at, and information you'd be asking for if they don't provide it, and those. That'll be our next session. I mean, I wanted to pop in sort of one example because it might be a little bit unclear for you. But okay, take for example culvert end walls, and in most audits, or even at a sort of preliminary stage road safety audit, but certainly detailed, you'd be able to identify unprotected culverts and make that commentary. It's really in the detailed design that you get an understanding of, which drivable culvert end wall are they using? Are they using a type 1 or a type 2? And is that the correct one for the orientation of the drainage? Okay, so you've got to use the correct one at the correct location. I put this in as a bit of a common audit finding because I think a lot of designers often out there just put drivable culvert end wall, and there's two types. There's a type 2 and a type 1, the perpendicular one, and then the parallel one. And most people just seem to pop down type 1. But if you put a type 1 down when the culvert is going across the road, it's really not going to provide as much benefit. It's not highly bad, but you do want to make sure you get as much benefit as possible. But they're the kind of specifics you'd be picking up in detailed design audits. So you can see if you've got a huge amount of design documentation to work through, how time consuming it can be. For the construction stage road safety audits, there is a bit of a misconception that these are that compliance check with the code of practice, and in terms of, are the bollards set out at the correct spacing? Have they used the correct sign? Is the speed sign closest to the road in a multi-message sign? Now, you will check all of that as a road safety auditor, but the road safety audit is a bigger thing. I mean, that stuff is a compliance audit, a compliance check. Have we met that? The audit is bigger, and maybe I'll just try and think of an example with one of these schemes that you do look at all of that, but maybe there's a McDonald's on this corner, okay, and you checked, okay, all the signs are looking good. They're in accordance with the code and everything's good. You can see them from a distance. But how are people now going to access the McDonald's? I mean, they're still going to want their Big Mac, aren't they? And they're still going to get it in one way or another. But are they going to have to, are they going to start walking across the tracks at different locations if we've closed all this off? And is that going to be a danger? Are they going to do U-turns in inappropriate spots? So or, are we diverting traffic down roads with schools or high pedestrian areas? So it's a bigger picture look at the safety of a scheme rather than just conformance with the documented codes of practice. So the other thing on construction stage 1 or road safety auditing is that I would expect it only to be done on fairly substantial schemes. The reason for that is if there's a, I don't know, doing a small patch or something like that, or some small maintenance work or something like that, and they have a very stock standard traffic management setup, while you would want somebody to have a think about wider risks, like a full-blown road safety audit is probably overkill in that situation. It's a bit hard to sort of grasp exactly when that sort of case is and not. A lot of jurisdictions just do it with dollar value triggers. If the work's over 100,000, you have to do 1 road safety audit, or if it's over $1 million, you've got to do 5 road safety audits or whatever it is. But Tony Bull will come and talk a little bit more about construction site road safety audits, and we can delve into that in a little more detail if you've got an interest. The pre-opening audits are when the ribbon is about to be cut, the road is not open to traffic, and so immediately you'll probably recognise then that is going to be for projects that are either greenfields or there's some major things happening that the area is blocked off before it opens. But as a road safety auditor, you're going through, you're checking the they put the RRP, the right coloured RRPMs in the right location, the guideposts the right way around. We've got the overlaps in the barrier rails, are they correct? Is the barrier the right height? You're looking holistically, you'll do probably drive-throughs and walk-throughs, checking for any anomalies, have they got everything right? So it's that final safety check. Now, of course, again, the surveillance officers you would expect would be doing this as well, but you provide that independent view. But just to keep you going there, let's see if anybody can spot an issue here that they might pick up in a post-opening. So this is, type it into the chat. A post-opening, and I'll come back to Andy's question. Post-opening audits are sort of when it's live to traffic, but it's very soon after it opens. And it's often practically the only way you can do it with the fact that you're in a brownfield site or the like. Okay, so what have we got in here? Turning movements from both lanes conflict with each other, and yes, so we've got, everybody seems to be picking that's popped it in. So we've got a vehicle in this lane can go straight and a vehicle in this lane can go right, so we've got some sort of forced conflict. So that's right, this has just been put in the wrong way, so line markers, the stencil is the wrong way around, and that's the kind of thing we would hope was picked up by a surveillance office, but a road safety auditor in the post-opening audit may pick this up. Probably the community will pick it up pretty quickly, and the media will pick it up pretty quickly as well if you're making these sorts of errors. But you might say, well, it doesn't really happen. Unfortunately, it does. Got a colleague who was doing he's doing the pre-opening audit for a major motorway upgrade, and $1 billion sort of bits of work, and they marked it a dual exit, and they marked it like this. So that was picked up by the audit team, and held back a little bit the opening while things were rectified. So there you go. It can happen a bit more than you think. So who am I giving prizes to on that one? I think it is, yeah, both Nicole and who was it? Bridget was there quickly as well. So pre-opening, post-opening, and existing conditions. So existing conditions road safety audits are something that I want to just briefly talk to this group, especially about, existing conditions audits, because they can be really beneficial, but they also can be, I think, misused. Now, I'll give a story, I suppose. I was managing one of the regions of Vic Roads in Victoria quite a while back, and road safety auditing was very much part of what was done, but there was a big push for road safety improvements, and the decision was made in the sort of head office to undertake road safety audits on on the entire arterial road network over a period, a 3-year period, I think it was. And so what happened was, I mean, it was just party time for consultants, because it was just, we're just going, oh, okay, that's what we've been asked to do. So you're just dividing up your network and saying, okay, go out and do an existing conditions road safety audit on this section. And what happened was we were just getting piles of road safety audit reports, thousands of issues, and we didn't really have a funding mechanism to address these. Yes, they were risk rated, so we were able to sort of prioritize them, but the amount of high risk and extreme risks was quite big, and we just weren't able to be addressing these. So that there was a halt put to that idea, and there was a bit more sort of common sense to it in the way that we went about it, which was to filter through which roads are appropriate, which sections of roads are appropriate to have this detailed set of eyes look on it. So you don't use road safety audits to sort of filter your network for the highest risk locations. Use other established methodologies for that, and that could be your existing OSRAP data, it could be your ANRAM data, and these things are available from the Centre for Road Safety or from other areas. Really, you can just use traffic volume and speed as a pretty good proxy for your regional network. It gets a little more complicated in urban environments, but use some sort of filter before you decide to go out and undertake road safety audits of these roads. Another point where a road safety audit is really valuable, and this is the picture I've got up here, is where there is community concern about something, and maybe differences of opinion between the community and the road authority, be it the council or the state road authority, or even disagreements amongst the community. And a road safety audit, being that independent view, can be a really good tool to say to the community, we're taking your issue seriously. While we might have an opinion on it, we think we should engage an independent expert to have a look at this, and then we'll share that report with you. So that can really alleviate community concern, and community, as sometimes get into their head that the road authority is not doing it for other reasons, or they're not, we're not getting a genuine look at this, and those sorts of things. One trick I did use for a while in these situations where the community had these concerns, like I was using this as that stakeholder engagement tool to a degree, was to provide the community with a list of qualified, accredited, and approved auditors, and let them choose the auditor. Like now, your procurement rules might change that, but that was actually working quite well for us, because they even felt empowered that they were, picking the independent expert rather than us having our, person that worked in the road authority for 30 years, and of course they're giving exactly what we wanted as an answer, if that makes sense. So Andy's asked a question back about the traffic guidance schemes and traffic management plans. Do you need to have accreditation to evaluate or assess those? As part of road safety auditing those, you don't, apart from, being a road safety auditor and being on the register of road safety auditors, which is what you're going through at the moment, for anybody who's not already on that register and following that process. So the audit, from that sense, no. To do a traffic management plan, to design one, to deploy one, you need different qualifications in different jurisdictions. Austroads is currently working on a harmonisation project to get that consistent across the country, so you don't need to have a different ticket to develop a traffic management plan in New South Wales compared to Queensland, compared to Northern Territory and the like. So keep an eye on that. But no, you can go and audit traffic management plans and schemes with just your road safety audit certification. Any question?
I'm just thinking, if you're looking at staging plans and TGS or TCPs, you need a basic understanding of tapers and distances and all that type of stuff. If you're assessing tie-ins or staging plans, I think it's possibly necessary.
Yeah,
not possibly.
It's a good point, Andy. I think I could make the same argument for detailed design. Like, you need to understand geometric design, and you need to understand pavement design, and you need to understand lighting. And what we're saying is that you build this team, and you want to look both at that level of detail, and somebody needs to be, as you say, somebody needs to know what's appropriate, how to read this stuff. You can build your team, though, with other people who complement and provide wider questioning and the like. But it is a good point.
Let's ask another question there. Ken.
Sure. Yep. Sorry, did you say you had another question?
Oh, it's in the chat. It comes up all the time.
Oh.
Speeding on local roads, and how do you gauge whether you need evidence? So you put classifiers down and you get a feel for what is there a speeding issue, yes or no? Do we use the 85th percentile? And then when you read the literature, Safe System sort of frowns on it. Just your opinion, mate.
It is a good question. So 85th percentile speed is a useful understanding of exactly sort of what it says. What's 85% of the drivers through here? What is their speed? 85th percentile speed for me is only really used as a design input, if that makes sense. So if I'm trying to work out, well, what deceleration distance do I need, or the like, in terms of how much pavement are we going to have to create here, the 85th percentile to me is sort of the one that I tend to use for that sort of stuff. But when I'm what barrier containment level are we going to need? How do when I'm calculating the length of need of a barrier system? So it's almost more like your investment decision is dictated by that. And the reason that I talk about it in that way is because, you have to stop at some point in reasonable expenditure. Because if you go to, 99th percentile for that sort of stuff, you will have such immense engineering of these facilities that the cost will just be out of control. You'll have these absolutely huge, turn facilities, and you'll have test level 5 and 6 barriers everywhere, and it'll just be way over engineered. So where is that sort of appropriate catering for the bulk of the community? And there's some safety factors built into some of that, and that's where you sort of land yourself. But
my question is even more simpler than that. Even for my colleagues, say a member of the public rings in, there's a speeding issue. Okay, the first thing I do is, okay, is the member of the public, let's justify whether it's true or not. When you get the printout, you get the average speed, the 85th percentile. Which one would you look at, Ken?
Well, I would look at both, but I would also look at the higher end. What are we seeing as max? Now, I don't take just the sole max. I will sort of look at how is this bell curve tailing, because the highest end of that speeding are the road users with the highest risk of being involved in crashes where death and serious injury occur. So, I'm going to use this as a little whiteboard, this diagram. Are we looking at a bell curve in speed that sort of drifts out like that? Or are we looking at a very sort of tight bell curve like that? And so we're basically talking about what are the standard deviations of it and the like. But it's really, I'm quite interested in down here and down here, as how many people are we seeing over speeds that we would see as acceptable. Now, if it's a very small few, I'd probably be more in the thinking about enforcement and working with police there to get that and some other measures. If it's sort of getting up to some decent numbers, you're thinking, okay, we've got to put in infrastructure here to calm the speed of a larger percentage. So reading and interpreting speed data and traffic volume data, you kind of don't want to just take one, which I think as you're saying there, you're looking at a few, which is I think the way to go, but do look at that top end. And I was actually looking at this the other day where, on behalf of the council, and they had community were concerned about speed in their street, the kids and across to the park, and that you've dealt with it hundreds of times. And the council officers said, had been sending letters back saying the 85th percentile speed is 32. That's very close to our aspirations of safe system speeds and the like. But then I dug into the actual data, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that's the 85th percentile. Well, the tail on this is long, and we're seeing quite a few up around the 40 and the 50, and then some of them are up in the 60s and 70s going through this location. So I do feel that there is a speed issue here, and the 85th percentile is not representing the actual risk there. Okay, good question though. So what I'm going to do now is just briefly talk about the steps of a road safety audit. So I've just told you about the feasibility stage audit, the concept or preliminary stage road safety audit, detailed design, so on and so on and so on. In every one of those road safety audits, we follow the same process and the same steps. So I'm going to take you through those steps. And there's, in the 2022 Austroad's Guide to Road Safety, there are 10 steps. And I'll point you at that for further information. Okay, so I'm going to take you through those. I want to remind you that audits take time, and that they do add value to that project. Now, I'll give a prize to somebody who can tell me something they think is wrong with that sign. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that over the next slides, and I will come back to it, but type it into the chat so you can see something you feel is wrong with that sign. Okay, I'll come back to that, I promise. We do need auditing to be an integral part of the design process, though. But let's talk about how do road safety audits sort of happen? What are the steps to be involved? The first thing is to select the audit team, and that is the responsibility of the client. Now, I say client here, and that's what the term is used in the Austroad's Guide, but I mean, in most practical senses, this is the road authority. Where it would not be the road authority, I suppose, would be potentially a car park or I was going to say a private road, and that's probably right, unless the private road eventually will become the asset of the state to manage. But yeah, the client is the one that's going to end up managing the road. And that they are appointed to select the audit team. In the case of developers, what often happens is that the developer is required to undertake road safety audits, and the asset manager, so the road authority, delegates the responsibility for selection of the audit team to the developer with the requirements of, you know, the audit team being qualified and being on the New South Wales register and those sorts of things. So then the information is provided over, so everything's collected up and packaged up, all the information that the team's going to need. And there's some sort of commencement meeting or discussion or the like, where all of that information is handed over, and the audit team's there and the client's there, and then there's a bit of assessing of the documentation at that stage where with the client, and I put the client in there as well, or Austroad's did, in this stage, because there is sometimes clarification sought, or do you have swept path diagrams? We need those, and you know, so there's that back and forth as you're assessing the document as a road safety audit. And then the sort of audit is conducted with the site inspection and the team getting out there and looking, having, you know, looked at the documentation as well, and they'll continue looking at the design documentation if there is design documentation. And then the report is written up by the audit team, and they issue that report over to the client. Then there is sometimes a completion meeting. Sometimes it's just a phone call or an email. Is everything good? You understand it all? And then the client responds. Each of those issues identified, the client needs to decide, or the road authority or whoever it is needs to decide, you know, do we agree with this, first of all? And if so, what are we going to do about it? And then they make changes to the design, and changes to the road, and changes to the scheme. So that's the process that is followed, the 10 steps. I'll go through these in a little bit more detail. So what we have is the selection of the audit team. Really, there is a team leader appointed. And in New South Wales, you have some specific team leader course requirements, and you have level 3 road safety auditors on your register. They're the sort of senior auditors who who are the ones who can lead the audit. You may have a group of, more than one level 3 auditor, but one of them will be sort of given the hat as the team leader for that audit. There'll also be road safety auditors, so level 2s and level 1s, who have completed courses and are continuing their learning journey and contributing. And then you could have others, and we call them observers or trainees. So observers would be people who maybe are providing specialist input, maybe very specialist road safety barrier input, like the photo there, where an observer is just giving some very specific information about these types of end terminals and how they function. Or so they're not going to be involved in the whole audit, they're just providing that specialist information. Or it could be somebody like the principal of a local school who comes in and gives some information, or the local police officer. And trainees are people who are aspiring to become a road safety auditor, perhaps haven't done the course yet, and not on the register, but are trying to learn and contribute. A few helpful tips here. It's an audit team. We don't audit as an individual. Now, that being said, there might be rare circumstances where a one-person audit may be okay, and Austrade does leave the door open a little bit for that, but it's clear that the overwhelming majority of road safety audits should be done as a team. A team means more than one. We want to make sure everybody's independent, and talked about that last session. And only that level 3 or that senior auditor can lead the audit team. And they're responsible for the final result and the final decisions and sign off as well. We would love audit teams to always have this broad mix of safety experience, knowledge of specifics around detailed design, and people with really good human factors knowledge, and people who see the road in varied forms. And we want males, females, others, and we want this big, rich mix. Practical reality means sometimes you just can't get that, and that's acknowledged. I put this picture up because it was a while back now, but there's an audit team I was putting together, and so it was myself and Michael and Johan, and we all are about the same age, male. We all worked for about the same amount of time at the same road authority, pretty much in the same roles. We look at the road the same. We see things relatively much the same. We think we know what we're looking for, but we acknowledge that we're not going to get much variety of input there. So we did ask Wendy to come along. Wendy's a bit older than us, female, scooter rider, and not an engineer, and not a technical person. Just asked us lots of questions and made lots of comments that were a little bit outside what we would usually be thinking, which was good. So if you have the luxury of being able to do that and put together a nice, varied audit team, it's pretty wonderful. A lot of the time you can't do it because of availability, time required to do it, because of the wrangling that's part of it. But it's nice to do. So you get all of that background information. You have your commencement meeting or discussion. Have you got everything you need? Have you got any traffic counts or whatever it is? You look at the documentation, and then you get out there and you look at the site. You look at the site in the daytime and the night. Now, again, Austrade has a little bit of a clause that says you may not need to do a nighttime inspection. It now, in the 2022 version, has another little clause which says, in some very rare circumstances, for feasibility audits, you may not need to do a site inspection. Now, that's the first time Austrade has ever entered into that, but it's an acknowledgement a little bit of some feasibility and early stage audits where they're greenfield sites, and you get out to a paddock and there's nothing there, and you're really going, what am I actually looking at here? You do get a bit of intel on the tie-ins and how it fits back into the road, but the decision was made that that will happen during concept stage and detailed design stage audits as well. So we may not need that. But you do, for the bulk of audits, you go out during the day and you go out at night to see the site. So why do we go out at night? Well, I mean, there's lots of obvious things like this one, which is during the day, you know, sort of where North Croydon is, and you're able to see your directional sign and make that decision. And then at night, it's not showing up. So you've got your retroreflective issues. So that's one sort of thing. You know, are the streetlights working as well? That sort of stuff. But some other things that probably, or that have popped up occasionally in nighttime inspections that I find interesting and really validate the time you spend going out there. Remember one where two roads, there was a new road alignment, and another road at a specific point came quite sort of close to this new alignment. And where we were standing, the headlights were really glaring in at this new alignment. So we didn't pick that up during the day, but at night it was really obvious and clear. And so we could flag that with the design team. Also, sometimes the street lighting presents visual deceit into the distance. May look like the road goes straight when it actually goes around a curve, or these sorts of things. So you can pick up some interesting intel. Also, occasionally the land use change, there's land use changes at night. It could be an area with, lots of nightclubs or something that really you see a lot of increased pedestrian behaviour or something like that you may not be as obvious during the day. Now, I saw some good answers come in here on this. I promised I'd come back to it, and I have. Let's see. Nicole has said the gap in the road is on the left, not the right. Looks like it should be in the US. Very good. And Justin has also clarified there, saying, yeah, it looks like you need to travel anti-clockwise. There we go. 3, yeah, good answers. I'm going to give, Nicole's already got this for today or two. So Justin, you're on the board for today. The gap is in the wrong spot. So the first question I've got is, do we have gaps in roundabout signs in Australia? And some of you are probably scratching your head and saying, oh, no, maybe we do, maybe we don't. And you've probably driven past thousands of them, tens of thousands of them in your time. We do have gaps. That is not where the gap goes, because exactly as was said in the wonderful comments there, that gap is there to provide guidance to the road user on which way they should travel around the roundabout. It's very subtle. That is how it should look. And now, if I was to do an existing conditions road safety audit and this sign was to appear like that, it begs the question of what level of risk would I put to this? So, and the answer actually for me is that I would actually put this as a to note in this scenario, and you don't really know the scenario here. I'm not even going to risk break that. I don't believe that reasonably represents potential, like a genuine potential for death and serious injury to our community. I don't like it. It's wrong. But the way the roundabout is set up and everything like that, I don't believe that we're reasonably going to be seeing a lot of people going the wrong way. And if they do, it'll be very slow and it'll all work out. However, there are situations where I would elevate that risk level. Anybody got any ideas on situations where I might elevate that risk level if they got that wrong? Any parts of our network that we might think are higher risk for the chance of people driving wrong way around a roundabout or anything like that? Pop your ideas in the chat. Remember, we will have a break close to half time. Okay, I'm getting some good ideas in there. Okay, so I've seen a few people talking about these sort of high volume areas, and I think that that's a reasonable one due to the fact that more people, more chance of these issues, and multi-lane roundabouts, probably a higher speed and a higher challenges. But Emma's come through with one, which is, I think, a really interesting one, and one that I did want somebody to bring up. So Emma, you can have a prize for this as well, which is around airports and the like, and tourist areas. And this is one that I was looking at out of Hobart Airport, Hobart International Airport, by the way, and where you get your rental car and you drive out, you drive along for a bit, and then you hit the first roundabout you hit is this. And you sort of think in the context of that, well, if an international was to arrive and, you know, maybe they're like jet lagged and they get into the rental car and off they drive and they're driving on the wrong side of the road and then they get to this and they've never really seen a roundabout before. And now I'm into a sort of scenario where I'm worried a bit more that the risk is up a bit. So I'd certainly be risk rating that. But the whole reason I'm sort of talking about this is all about the context of risk assessment, isn't it? So you've got to think about, you know, the environment, the land use, the users, you know, what sort of scenarios can you conjure up, and then you know, you're thinking about adjusting your risk scoring accordingly. So then you write up your audit report, and the report will have descriptions of the project and the stage of audit that you're doing, list of information that's provided, that was provided to the audit team. I flag that as probably more important than some people may expect, just to cover yourself off for future litigation and these sort of things, or future reviews. It's happened a few times there where I've been providing different legal in court and the like, and road safety audits have been done, and there's been questions, but having very clearly laid out which design, which revision of design, and the date of that design in the audit report, it becomes pretty clear what was actually audited rather than, you know, what was built. And there was actually quite a discrepancy in all of those cases. So that flags another process deficiency that, you know, if you get an audit done and it significantly changes the form of the project, or something else occurs that significantly changes the form of the project, which was the case in these legal battles where they discovered cultural heritage and a service issue, and they altered things, you know, accordingly, which happens in projects, doesn't it? But you should be thinking about the need for an audit, a re-audit, or at least engaging back with the audit team and saying, hey, this change has happened. Can you now do a revision to the audit report to include that and have another look at it? It was the audit team members, the date that the audit was carried out, any inspections you did, and then your issues in a logical manner. Now, we'll give you an audit template to work with. The audit template will give you to work with conforms with the 2022 version of the Austroads Guide to Road Safety. I will just check what New South Wales would use as a standard template these days. I suspect it'll be exactly the same with the column of recommendations removed. But I'll double check that. But I do think it will be good for this course for you to do an audit that conforms with all of the 2022 guidance. The reason for that being that, as I said, the certificate can be used to get yourself registered across Australia and New Zealand. So you would be doing this as well. Yes, so certainly road safety audits will be expanded. It'll be freedom of information to Transport for New South Wales, and those audits will be public, or at least into the hands of the different legal authorities. So that's always important to remember that this document can and will be used in that way. So you issue the audit report over to the client, and there may be completion meetings, and then responses are written and things are implemented. Now, actually, I think this comes up in the slides. I'll go through. I've got a few actual written notes in slides here. The report's given over to the project manager or the client or the designer. And then, everybody should keep their own file copies, absolutely. Now, the project manager or designer is required to respond to all the findings, and in most jurisdictions, recommendations, the audit report, and write, we agree with this or we disagree with this, and we're going to do this as a way to lessen that risk, or that you've recommended this, we can't do that. We're actually going to do this to lessen that risk instead. That's all fine. So responding is pretty vital, and the lawyers, and we're talking about lawyers here, will just rub their hands with glee if there is a road safety audit that was undertaken and no response to it. Like it's just it's sitting there unactioned. So it's got to become an accepted part of the process, is that getting into the report and somehow responding and tracking any commitments. Andy?
Just refreshing my memory, Ken. So you get a list of corrective actions. Is there a time period where you have to address the issues? And,
No.
And the second part, if you don't have the funding, the get out clause is you have a program of works established. Would that be right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So there is no time period, and it's about just I think it's on the next slide actually, where I talk a little bit about this, but it's a really valid point where I'll jump to it now. The project manager or the receiver of this audit report, it's been done to help reduce your risk. It's your project. You're responsible for what will and won't happen. It's just about laying out that, that way that you're going to do it. So you've got a few things there. You've got the fact that there's not unlimited funds out there. So an auditor can just freely write down recommendations in the jurisdiction that does recommendations. This is probably another reason why New South Wales, moved away from that, because, the cost implications may not be there. But even risks that are identified, you don't need to accept that risk. You as the receiver of the report are absolutely entitled to say, we disagree with that, and here's the reason why. That's important. Here's the reason why we disagree with it, and here's the information. That's all legitimate, and that's fine. The next one is to say, yep, agree with the risk, we can't do anything about that at this stage, but we've put it into the program, or we've scheduled it to be part of the next round of planning projects or whatever it is. I would hope, though, if high-risk ones come out of that there are interim measures that could be done. So you might say, well, we've put in for a roundabout for this location. In the interim, we'll be looking at speed reduction measures or further warning or something as an interim measure. But just think of a road safety audit as an advice piece, okay? Auditors don't have legislative power. They can't force you to do anything. This is advice. It's just advice in a form that, has some risk ratings and issues identified. So that one back there was talking about, your responses could become public, and it's good to, good practice to send things back to the audit team and say, hey, this is what we're doing with that report you gave us, and thank you for it. But that is not a requirement. You can receive a road safety audit report and that's it. Never talk to the audit team again. It's okay. That's part of accepted practice, but audit teams like to get that feedback to see what's happening, and it nicely ties things up. Okay, so that's the section we want to talk about there. Ooh. Sorry. I think it's actually good timing for us to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about pedestrian safety. And part of an Austrade's course is that we will talk about different road users, do a short session just to ensure in our minds and our eyes as auditors, we're thinking about all road users and what are their needs and are there specifics. We can talk for weeks about pedestrians, but we're going to condense it into a 50-minute presentation. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes now, and that's time for you to go get a coffee and have a good stretch, and we'll get back to it in 5 minutes. Give it 20 more seconds and then we'll get back into it, and I will share my screen now. Okay, so let's have a chat about pedestrians, and in this part of this module, we want to have a look at some of the requirements of pedestrians for safe travel. We'll point you at some technical information regarding pedestrian safety infrastructure. We're going to have a look at common issues for pedestrians. I'll spend a fair bit of time on that, and also look at some case studies of incidents involving pedestrians, so we can try to predict those in the future before they happen and weed them out. And we're going to talk a bit about pedestrian terminology. Don't forget to count your wallies, of course. Okay, there are 4 groups or categories of pedestrians at greatest risk. So let's see what you come up with. Pop them into the chat as you think of them. Okay, types of pedestrians. So, okay, elderly, children, disabled, and there's one more. So as you ponder which this last category is, I will I will jot down who the prizes are going to. Gee, it's a hard one to work out here. Justin. Oh, I've got a username here. I think it's Matthew. It might be Matthew. I'll work that out. Oh, Paul, is it? Sorry. Thank you, Paul. For disabled seniors and kit. Okay. So the one that we've been missing here, and I haven't seen it come up yet, is intoxicated. Travelers is an interesting one. But let's pop those up there. So there's different ways to look at risk, obviously, and when I say at greatest risk, what do I mean by that? Well, elderly represent a higher risk. They're overrepresented in crash data, but at an individual level, they are also at greater risk because of lower cognitive processing ability or slower cognitive processing ability, and also they're more frail. So when what could be a minor incident happens, it can be a serious injury. Young are able to withstand a lot more force, a huge amount of force actually, but are hidden behind objects or dart out from behind parked cars and the like. So that's an issue. Disabled at a individual level are at higher risk because they sometimes can't cross at safe locations, or they're trapped on the road rather because they can't get up a curb, or their vision is impaired, or hearing is maybe impaired, and these sort of things. And intoxicated is far and away the greatest number of, or if you group people who are intoxicated and pedestrian trauma, it's the biggest group by a long shot in terms of the data. Now, that's an interesting one because it gets you sort of wondering and thinking a little bit about, well, gee, can we design infrastructure when people are going to be intoxicated and the like? And really, we need to factor that into our auditing and say, well, okay, if there's an area that's got a higher number of intoxicated people, we need to think about that in our design of our facilities and the speed and the crossing and the way things work and the like. Sure, we need to try to work on having better other systems in place for maybe making it so not so many people are getting as intoxicated or these sorts of things, but from an infrastructure perspective, there's stuff we can do. The basic strategies for pedestrian safety, we think about either segregating or separating or integrating. And so those are really, segregation being, a motorway, for example. This is for vehicles and no pedestrians shall be, if you do crash analysis of motorways, unfortunately, you do see pedestrians in your data quite a bit. It's often people getting out of vehicles for one reason or another, which sort of categorised as pedestrians in that sense. And your malls, of course, and in areas where vehicles are not allowed, and so that's our segregation. The separation is separation in time or space, and in time is really pedestrian crossing or a signalised crossing where pedestrians use it at one point in time, vehicles use it at another, or a school crossing, for example, or other different types of crossing arrangements. Actually, I'll give a prize if anybody can tell me what a crossing, so like a scramble crossing is what it's commonly called. But can tell me what the official name of that is? Yeah, Justin's on that. Barnsteads. It's a Barnsteads. Yeah, somebody called Barnes must have come up with it. It's where you can cross all directions. Yeah. I think it's like it's not a barn dance, it's a Barnes dance. There is a snippet actually there talking about what are the safety implications for pedestrians and vehicles associated with the implementation of barn stances? Because most traffic engineers will only focus on the delay implications associated with this for different road users. So separation in space, we're talking about pedestrian refuges, footpaths and those sorts of things, which are wonderful facilities. When we are auditing and thinking about things like pedestrian refuges, there's certainly documented standards and guidelines around this. But I always encourage auditors, while we have a look at 2 metre minimum desirable and these sorts of things, just have a think about it from a logical perspective. Okay, what road users we got here? Okay, a bike could come and try to cross and pause in this. Is there enough space for a bike to be there? Okay, what about if somebody's pushing a pram, a father or a mother pushing a pram? Are they going to be, in traffic? And I see 2 people are on the same, have the same way of thinking of it. And I really like that, and I love the fact that people are popping in that stuff, because that's how an auditor should be thinking, not just blindly, does it meet this, but who's going to use it, how is it going to be used? And somebody else has said mobility scooter there. Andy, did you want to contribute to that in the conversation?
Yeah, something that comes up all the time with refuges is those keep left signs.
Yeah.
Whether it's too high, too low, it hides pedestrians. Do we really need it? Do we need to go to a skinny type of keep left? It comes up quite a lot. Ken, what do you think?
I think it's, great question and great point. So the height of it, I think, is important to look at, and the need for it, exactly as you said. Some locations, I think it actually is needed. And certainly as an auditor, you'll be putting yourselves in the driver's seat, doing all sorts of turns out and turns in and turning around and these sort of things, especially often at a T intersection, which has some level of complexity, and you've got your splitter island and maybe a refuge. Something simple like this may be obvious, but as you get other lanes or slip lanes or bits and pieces, we can have drivers going into the wrong side there. So that's why a point where you keep left becomes quite important. But yeah, you've got thinner ones available. They're the long one. I keep left there. It's got an arrow down. Let's keep left down there. So that they are available, which can assist in some situations. They are toll, though. And there are situations where I think you're right. You may not need the keep left at all.
Would you still be liable, Ken, if you didn't have it? Because you've got all the indicators there with the line marking and the chevroning. If you left it out, would it be a problem not complying to this extract?
You might want, that's probably, again, where road safety auditors may be able to assist in this, where if you just say, well, we don't think it should be there, and it's handed over to the road safety audit team, and you can flag it with them and say, we made a decision not to put it there because we think it's going to block sight lines to the pedestrian, and we think that it is very clear to keep left of that, so we're not seeing that concern, and see if they bring it up as an issue. That then nicely covers you, because you've gone through a process of independent expert opinion on this deviation from what is a documented standard. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's not documented or is very grey, and this is straight out of 1742. Like, it's a standard setup. So varying from it and having that appropriate check, I think, is good practice. Okay, thank you.
On that, Ken, I was just going to ask, as an auditor, would you, if you thought that was an issue, like this example here, straight line, there's no chance that they're going down the other side, and you thought it was an issue causing site issues, would you recommend they take it down if it's in the standard?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yep, absolutely. And that may be, this may be a very good example of where standards have a risk that's built into them. And, we say, oh, well, they should change the standards. Well, that can take 20 years to change the standard sometimes. It's crazy sometimes how long it is. Or, that this is trying to cover so many scenarios, and that, 80% of the time it's better to have it, 20% it's not. Well, they've still got it there. So auditors certainly are able to and should question a standard layout as to whether it is safe or not in the context it is, and just, generally. So that's good. Thank you. Good discussion. And sorry, interesting to see there that New South Wales doesn't accept the thin hip lefts. So just note that. Yeah, so also thinking about all the different road users, scooter riders, thinking about when there's, if you've got a really popular crossing point of refuge, and you're going to have multiple people, it can get be something of interest. Pedestrian overpasses, just be aware, and as an auditor, be that voice of genuinely what the public is going to do. Not in theory that everybody will cross over this because it's there, but practically, will people use it? And we know pedestrian overpasses are a bit of a classic where, they're built and then you still have huge bulks of pedestrians using the road because it's a much better and easier way to cross rather than going up and up and up and down and down and down, and it's a big long journey. So don't believe that the pedestrian risk is eliminated by pedestrian overpass. Okay, Emma's brought up a really good question around underpasses and safety implications for that. So the reason I do want to talk about that is, what is our role as road safety auditors? Do we include personal safety? And technically the answer is no, that's not our issue to deal with. So maintenance isn't our issue to deal with either. And some people will say often, and I see this sort of conversations coming up, they're going to get flooded, and that could be an issue. And I say, well, I don't think we've had somebody drown in a pedestrian underpass ever in Australia in the circumstances of all of a sudden it rose amongst them, but not something to be completely dismissed. I know there's been some big floods, but people sort of tend to know not to go into a pedestrian underpass if it's full of water. But I suppose the point is that as a road safety auditor, you'd be pointing out the road safety issues with this. So for vehicle drivers, how are they going to drop off into this and those sort of things. For pedestrians, is it clear where the underpass is so that they can use this facility rather than crossing on the road? And then I would, as a road safety auditor, still note some things around this. I say, is it appropriately lit? It's long and dark and there is some, but I wouldn't necessarily risk rate those. I would paint them to note. Because it's a bit outside of the scope of what will occur in our death and serious injury numbers. Shared zones. So shared zones, and New South Wales has some specific requirements around shared zones, which you will know very well. But shared zones are that integration, that sharing of a road space. And of course, they are areas where vehicles must give way to pedestrians, as I'm sure you know, and they're a legal requirement from that perspective. Some really good advice, though, to have in auditing a shared zone is, does it look like a road? Now, I know New South Wales uses a shared zone in the specifics of your speed zoning guidelines in a slight way that you kind of can use it in areas that do look like roads, and that's done across the country. But the best design advice I can give for creating a shared zone is make it not look like a road. Now, this one's not bad. They've removed curbing, they've changed the colour, they haven't changed the sort of texture as much, but they've marked it like a road, and then they put the parking and it's all straight. Okay. What you want in a really good shared zone is an area where a driver's in there and go, am I even allowed to drive in here? That is a great shared zone. It's really low speed, it's clear, and if pedestrians are, there, they will stop and give way. The point coming in there around, can removing of curbing be a danger to vision impaired people? Good question, and that's probably one of those DDA expert discussions. So if I was auditing and I had that concern and I didn't feel I had the level of knowledge for that, which I don't feel I do, I would call up a DDA person or somebody I know who has that knowledge, get their opinion, and I may add them as an observer in the road safety audit with that specialist knowledge. Yeah, okay, and some really good discussion going in there about how you may be able to address that. Okay, let me run through a few examples, and then I'll give you one. I'll give you a task to do live in the session, or something to have a look at. I'm going to give you some examples now. So sight lines to pedestrian crossings is an important one. Vegetation, thinking about where vegetation is. If you're looking at designs, looking at the landscaping plans, trying to think about the growth that will happen, and will this block sight lines, or are they going to be putting things there, or are there existing sight line blockers? We just talked about the signage, which can sometimes block sight lines. But making sure you know, and as an auditor, I will often do a quick sightline calculation for a pedestrian crossing to just check that we've got everything right. Now, one of the big ones is parked cars on the approach to a pedestrian crossing. And I've been doing a bit of work in this of late, and I think it's worth mentioning this because there is a bit of a common default position that people go to, which is based on the road rules, which says no parking 20 metres on the approach side to a pedestrian crossing. Now, there is a line that sits under that, which also says unless you sign it otherwise. Now, a lot of local governments especially just say 20 metres is what we have to do. And this has two issues for me. The first issue is that in some situations, they can't get that 20 metres because they, for one reason or another, can't remove the car parking, or it becomes such an issue. And they then don't put in the pedestrian crossing because they can't do that. And I think that that's a big loss, especially, I'm talking about raised crossings. I don't particularly like grade crossings like this. racecourse. The second one is that in some situations, the 20 meters actually doesn't cut it. You might need more. So just meeting the minimum standard doesn't deal with it. So do your sightline calculation and get an idea. And on sightline calculations or a pedestrian crossing, you set pedestrian 1.6 meters back for your sight triangle. And obviously then you take the operating speed of vehicles. In that case, you do take 85th percentile speed if you just follow the normal way to calculate that distance. But these ones on slip lanes are really also very interesting, because if you're in a car approaching here, where are you looking? You're looking out there to see if you can put the foot down and go, aren't you? So we've got pedestrian coming out. Pedestrian has priority and so they may be less focused on approaching vehicles, and the vehicle is moving along looking in completely wrong direction, and that's sort of a dangerous scenario there. So think also about the tracking of large vehicles, and you really do want to look at swept path diagrams for designs. You want to, if you have an existing site, be looking at whether you can see where the vehicles are tracking from the tyre marks and the like. And we've seen across Australia, unfortunately, quite a few incidents of fatality and serious injuries associated with pedestrians standing, waiting in sort of these spots, on their phone and stuff as they do, and a large vehicle turning, but just then the trailer or the back part of the vehicle tracking over and them getting caught up in that. So we want to be able to get those issues out before they happen. Sometimes as an auditor, you need to look at what's not there. And so in this case, it's a proposed heavy vehicle bypass route, and it's got some pedestrians already, but we put lots of heavy vehicles down there. And there is no footpath, there's no separation there. And it's okay during summer for some people, but if you're in a mobility device or you're pushing a trolley or a cart or something, or a pram, or if it's muddy or the like, people are just using the shoulders and walking along that. So that's the kind of stuff we can certainly be putting into our audit reports. There's another picture there, and we've got a gap in the roundabout sign. Is it in the right spot? Yes, we do. You won't be able to drive past a roundabout sign now without checking gap location. And for pedestrians, we use the term desire line. I'm sure most of you have heard of the term desire line, but it's simply the point from where a pedestrian is to where they want to get to. And the desire line of this sort of location here is from, the desire line goes to the station, which is over here. And you can see that this lady's walking sort of close to her desire line. There's a pedestrian fence there. And so what she will do is just walk along the road there until she finds a gap in the pedestrian fence. And that is my sort of flag and reminder that, pedestrians will take what is the easiest route. And we need to, again, be the common sense eyes as auditors to say, okay, you put a pedestrian fence there, but there's every chance people will walk now along the road. And we see that quite a bit. I'm not a big fan of pedestrian fencing. I think it can sparingly be used around the network in appropriate spots, but most of the time I don't like it due to the chance of this from a road safety perspective. Also from a more livability and place perspective. As soon as you start putting that in, you're trying to corral pedestrians like sheep, and it erodes, you know, your livability and place value of an area. But the places on the network that I really see value of pedestrian fencing from a safety perspective are outside pubs, and I've done 2 coronial investigations associated with pedestrians being killed outside of drinking establishments. One of them was 2 pedestrians killed. They were fighting and they came out and got straight onto the road. And the other was a gentleman who, it's a bit unclear, but appears to have fallen as they came out. So in both cases, pedestrian fencing would have acted as a pedestrian containment device, rather than trying to direct people to a crossing spot or stop people crossing in a specific location. And the same goes outside schools. I haven't had to investigate any incidents specifically around schools in that particular circumstance, but around school gates, pedestrian fencing provides that containment again for the kids that are, you know, running after a ball or playing around or whatever it is, and we've got the same thing to try to stop them getting on. So again, as an auditor, you're able to do that. You're able to, you know, have a logical think about it. What will they actually do? Where will they go? And are we presenting any issues? This one was just off social media, which I think describes pedestrian design line pretty well, or what they call it, user experience there. A few diagrams of that. And of course, in some, not so much in Australia anymore, but certainly around the world, we do see large roads dividing a community or, you know, between an industrial area or a commercial area or a residential area. Of course, pedestrians are going to use those facilities, and auditors can provide that information. Okay, another case study. So we can, you know, unfortunately, we're learning using reactive methods here, which is because incidents have happened, and we're trying to then understand, well, how can we prevent these in the future? But this photo is taken, and this is what the driver sees. And the next photo is taken just behind this hazard board on what a pedestrian sees. And so that's what the pedestrian sees. And you can see. Okay, so the question is, who has right of way? Who has priority at this location? The pedestrian or the vehicle? Anybody want to have a yes in the chat? Yes. Okay, Blair's on the board first there. It is the vehicle, because yeah, it's not a pedestrian crossing, it does not mark, it doesn't have the signs. But it didn't take long. My colleague and I out there doing this investigation of the incident to see that some pedestrians walk up and happily walk across with priority in their mind, or actually in their subconscious, like these 2 gentlemen who just strolled straight out, and the car slowed down and stopped. But unfortunately, in this incident, it looks like it was a similar thing where the pedestrian walked straight out, the vehicle continued on through, and there was an incident. Andy, did you want to comment on this one?
Oh, mate, there's a few things going through my head. Down at Eden, on their main street, they've coloured the where pedestrians cross blue. In Kiama, on Belinda Street at a refuge, they've covered from one end of the road to the other through the slot of the refuge red. And we've said in the past that gives the wrong message to pedestrians. in regards to right of way, but they're not listening. So is that the same in Victoria, mate?
Absolutely. And it's one of my pet annoyances is confusion of priority. And this is an example here, which I think then there's another one here, which is kind of similar, where we're starting to see this proliferation of painting the road to try to, fool people into priority. Now, this is a weird situation though, where under the road rules, sort of pedestrians do have priority for half of this. So, but what I'm very much on your page there, Andy, in the sense of why are we not making it clear who's got priority? Okay, here's another interesting example where there was a bit of concern that this may be perceived as pedestrian priority. And so then they used yellow paint to try to avoid that confusion, because yellow is a warning color and white's a regulatory color. And I'm like, the public is not that, like, we're missing the point.
That's ringing alarm bells for me, Ken, when you see a pram ramp connecting to a speed hump. There's two functions here. You've got to separate whether it's a pedestrian crossing or it's a speed calming device. That's ringing alarm bells for me.
And that's right. So I think that, this could very nicely be made into a wombat crossing, or as you say there, let's separate it out. So it's clear that this is a road, you're crossing a road, let's all be alert. You can spread it out and do it like this. But yeah, we're going to see more and more of this, I think, because, getting people active and pushing pedestrian is more and more important, as it should be, and that's all great. But I think with the push to do that, we need those lenses of safety to understand any of this confusion of priority. And as I showed you from that other one, we do see incidences, and confusion of priority is a big contributing factor. And pedestrians being involved is a big thing. Lots of it around airports as well. I mean, here's one where you could get out of Launceston Airport, and you've got all the people picking up passengers out here, and you've got the taxis that run through here and other cars, and it looks like pedestrian priority, but it's actually vehicle priority. The raised nature of that lessens the risk, but you can clear that up pretty well. And then, of course, you're seeing a lot of this stuff. Like now, some jurisdictions will call it a courtesy crossing, and you can see what they're trying to do: encourage pedestrians to cross there, encourage vehicles to be more alert to look for pedestrians. But we're confusing people, and it just takes one to be confused, and that other time where the other is confused, and we've got problems. So yeah, the more consistency around the pedestrian priority crossings and getting them out there is important. I want to see lots of them, but we need to do the line marking. So not just the sign, it needs to be marked correctly, it needs to be clear, and ideally with raising as well. And just another one here to, actually I'll go to this one, just to show you, I showed you that incorrect line marking. Here's one where we see a pedestrian crossing, but whoever's installed it has thought that the pedestrian sign should face the pedestrian so they know where to cross rather than the vehicle. So that's the kind of stuff, again, that a pre-opening / post-opening road safety audit would be picking up. Contractor issues, you'd hope that wouldn't happen, but it does. It's out there. There's another real photo for you. Andy.
Sorry, mate, I'm a bit of a pain asking questions.
No, it's good.
Something that's come up with our colleagues and us is with zebras, in my time, lighting's always been mandatory with zebras, right? The right of way. Is that the same in Victoria?
Yes, across the country, yep.
So wombats. My other question is, does that apply that you need some sort of lighting at pedestrian refuges or curbside blisters? That's a crossing point, but is that what I've read? It's not mandatory that the same as zebras, but should you have a certain amount of lighting?
Yeah, so I think there's, you know, from a standards and guidelines perspective, anything raised within the pavement area, the general pavement area, should be lit. And so that is a curb out stand or a refuge island should be lit. The level of lighting required, I'd have to go and actually look in whether, like, a pedestrian crossing has a high lighting level requirement. I would say too high, but you know, that is what it is. But I'm not sure whether there's those intense requirements for those other features. But again, in order to, shouldn't be driven by those specifics, should be driven by the thoughts of, well, okay, is a vehicle in low light going to miss this? Are there other features we can do? But yeah, you may turn to that to get some more information. Okay, here's a, yeah, Justin's pointed out the update to the Australian standard in lighting, and yeah, pedestrian crossings have to be lit up like a Christmas tree, which causes trouble for spillover lighting. There's obviously cost implications and things like that. But anyway, let's have a look at this one. And okay, forget about the big, you know, markings on the road. I just want you to look at the crossing. And I want you to imagine that you're a road safety auditor, but you're getting to this at the design stage. Okay. And I'm going to get you to make some recommendations or identify some things and maybe make a recommendation. I'm okay for recommendations that to happen in this course. That would improve safety, which is a sort of minor design change. Okay. Some of you might want to raise it, and that's absolutely great, but that's not the one I'm particularly sort of looking at this stage. Anybody got any thoughts on issues they see there in this, if it was a design, or you can see it now, and ways that you might lessen this risk? Some good things coming in there, talking about, yeah, being able to see the sign. All right, good. So Bridget's got the one that I was thinking. I think everything that's coming up there is really good. So, but Bridget has pointed out that this bin and this planting on this side, it blocks sight lines for a vehicle approaching, doesn't it? So it's a design, you know, it's been a design decision to put it at that location. We easily have put it over on this side, couldn't we, to open up sight lines with a small pedestrian and kids going out here. We could open up those sight lines quite nicely. And that's a very small design tweak, but you look at those sightline things as a road safety auditor. But I do like all the other ones that came up as well. But I'm going to keep going just to get us going. One more case study of a tragic incident here, pedestrian killed, again doing a fatality investigation on behalf of the road authority, an in-depth one. So this occurred with a pedestrian stepping out from this location and being struck by a vehicle coming through here. Let me show you sort of what the vehicle's seeing. So that other photo was taken about this location. And I'll go back a little bit further. You can see there that this is a high-speed road. I think it's a 70 km/h road. It is a 70 km/h road. Fairly shallow entry into the service road. And you know, if we go back here, you can see there that this is an example of where you can't do your site inspection by photos and street view, because when you're out there, it's kind of different. But like you really have the pedestrian crossing going, you have the lights, and so everything makes you want to sort of step out and go. And it's this almost see-through, pedestrian see-through, like you're looking out there and you step, and we don't have CCTV footage of it or anything, but I get the feeling that could have contributed, and the pedestrian could have just taken that step out. And then the speed of vehicles coming in through here is just very high. So what we've got is this discontinuity of pedestrian priority and an environment that, just doesn't quite make, make sense from that perspective. And unfortunately, we've seen somebody lose their life as a result of that. So ideally, we would have got in there when those signals were being put in the first place and had that thinking, and that connectivity would have happened. Unfortunately, in this case, it's been a retrofit, but now, it's there. It's got the raised pedestrian crossing and lighting in there now. So we talked a little bit about Disability Discrimination Act auditing, DDA, and people with disabilities. I just want to be clear that a road safety audit is not a DDA compliance audit. So there are different things, and you should be clear with anybody you're doing an audit for that you're not going to be checking for compliance with that act and relevant standards associated with that act. So, you won't, as an auditor, be doing that detailed check of the height of handrails and the grade of different bits and pieces. That is a separate exercise. Now, as a road safety auditor, you might see things that you go, okay, that, the tactiles aren't contrasting the color of the pavements. And you can put that in. For me, that's a note. Okay, it's very hard for me to say that will result in death and serious injury or injury for road users in the timeframes we have in our risk matrices. Unless it was outside maybe a hospital or something like that. But most of the time, DDA issues that I just spot, I just know. But I'm clear to say that, you're not doing a compliance with the DDA Act here, check. That's a separate exercise. I'll jump through that because I want to get you to have a little bit of a look at this in our last couple of minutes. So here is an intersection. It exists, obviously, because you can see it. And this intersection has crash history. It's got vehicle-to-vehicle crashes, but it's got 6 pedestrian crashes in the last, I think it was actually the last 3 years. It's quite intense, with some serious injuries and lots of near misses reported as well. And it's one specific spot this is happening. Now, I'm going to put up a poll in a second, so you'll be able to vote on where you think this is, and I'm going to give you some options. Okay. So this is the same crash type for pedestrians happening at the same location. Question around how do you become a DDA compliance auditor? There are specific training courses associated with that. I don't know exactly where they are and how to do them, but I think we can do a bit of Googling on that. But back to this intersection. Okay, here are your 5 options. Each option does present a level of pedestrian risk. So I will put the poll up in a second, and you'll be able to vote. Remember, you're not being marked on this, but for crash diagrams, the solid line is the vehicle, dotted line is the pedestrian. That's pretty much a common standard way to draw these up. So pedestrian crossing here being struck by a vehicle turning in number 1, pedestrian crossing there at number 2 being struck by a vehicle, 3 crossing the slip lane being struck by a vehicle, 4 crossing the slip lane being struck by a vehicle, 5 turning into the driveway. Now I'll put the poll up. Session 2, poll 1. I think this is it. Let's see what comes up. Yep. Okay, hopefully that's popped up on your screen. Now you can move the poll around, hopefully, so you can have a look. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, or maybe just give you 1 minute, and you make your guess, your prediction at which location that is. Okay, I'm not seeing any votes coming in, so I'm just wondering whether people are actually seeing that poll popped up on their screen. Okay, people have voted and it's not coming up on mine, so that's interesting. Okay. Okay. Everybody voted it. I can't see anything. All right. Okay, I'm going to end the poll because it doesn't seem to be doing its job here. What did we vote for? Type it in the chat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's have a look. Okay. Our prize goes to Kelly. Now, the reason the prize goes to Kelly is Kelly said 2. Now, as I say, each one of these I craftily put there because there is pedestrian risk at each one of these. And I can see why people would have picked one. And in fact, I can see why people would have picked them all. But 2 is the one that is presenting a lot of this issue. And why is that? Why is that? Well, it's there's something a little bit odd about it. And we've got a slip lane and then we've got the pedestrian crossing. But that's not how slip lanes should be. A slip lane here goes out and the pedestrian crossing is this side. That's how it should be if you're going to have a slip lane. I talked to you. So the issue here, which we talked a little bit about, the drivers up here, they're looking out this way. And it just happens that the timing of this means that as vehicles are stopping there, this is going green, and a vehicle sort of approaching here has that gap, and they will turn, and they have been turning right over pedestrians. So this is, what we want auditors to be picking before this is ever built like that. And it's now been rectified, and it goes as it should to the island, then across. Still got this bit of a weirdness going on here, which I don't like, but that sort of stuff we shouldn't be building, and auditors can play a role in identifying it before we have to have all of these members of our community seriously. So you might go, oh, man, what if I missed that as an auditor? Well, remember, I gave you 30 seconds there, and you have a lot of time to really look at it. You'll go out to the site if it's an existing site, or you'll be looking at the designs. You'll be putting yourself in the shoes of walkers, in the saddle of riders, in the seat of drivers, and doing all movements and really getting your head around things. So don't get overly concerned by that. And I think, we can and you will find these issues if they're planning to build them or they're existing. And the volume would influence that. Yeah, it's a good point. And you do want to get out there at different times of day as an auditor, see it when, at the start of school, at the end of school, when it's being used like this, and when it's quiet, and if there's a football stadium, when, there's a match day, if that lines up, that's great to be able to see. And just finishing on a few pedestrian treatments, we've got puffin crossings, pedestrian user-friendly intelligent crossings, which is the thing that keeps the light red until there's no movement on the crossing. We've got 2 can crossings, so 2 can cross pedestrians and cyclists. I'm not making up these names, by the way. These are the official names. Somebody went with a bird theme. Pelican crossings, pedestrian light controlled crossings. So the driver sees red and then it goes to a flashing orange for a while just to let anybody clear off the crossing. And there you go. We've made the world's, top 10 funniest road signs. Makes complete sense to me. Why is it called a pelican? Oh, it's pedestrian light controlled. I tried to mash it and then changed a bit of the spelling. Pedestrian light controlled. Pegasus crossings are for horses, and it's because a horse is a vehicle, and part of our road rules, you need to especially do that. Of course, you can't drive a horse when you're intoxicated or ride a horse when you're intoxicated because that is drink driving. But you can ride an intoxicated horse. It's one of my favorite jokes. I say it every course.
I also heard if you're pulling a horse, leading it, you're classed as a pedestrian, but if you're riding it, you're classed as a vehicle.
There you go. Thank you. And I think that's pretty much going to end our session, except for I will say that I haven't told you this yet, but the Austroads Guide at the back of it has these big, long things called prompt lists. And they've got lots and lots of questions to prompt your thinking about issues. And pedestrians are covered in this in the walking and cycling. And you get lots of questions. What's the pedestrian desire line? Is there sight lines to pedestrian crossing point? And it continues on and on and on. So you will use these when you start auditing to help guide your thinking, prompt thinking and ideas. So there's lots in there. That's actually going to do us for today. And we were having such good discussion there. It's got us right on to time. Thank you. And I can get some laughs there. Prevent a horse from walking on the narrow bridge. There you go. It's all happening. Thank you very much. Now, there is a quiz in the learning management system after today's session. Finish off that assignment. Don't spend too long on it. Get it in, get it finished, and we will we'll see you next week. Log in a little bit early as you did for a chance to win a prize. And have a good weekend.
Thanks, Ken. You too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.